She never had the talent. That's how my brother introduced me from the stage, into a microphone, in a ballroom of 400 people, on the night his company crowned him Inventor of the Year. He said it warmly, the way you'd say something fond about a sister who'd tried her best and come up short. "My sister Cora's here somewhere tonight," he said, shading his eyes against the lights, smiling. "She always wanted to be the inventor in the family. Funny how it works out. She never quite had the talent for it. But she's got the biggest heart, and she's so proud of me. Stand up, Cor." And 400 faces turned to find me, and a soft, sympathetic, "Isn't that sweet" kind of laugh moved through the room, and I stood up. In the back, at a table near the kitchen doors, where they'd seated the guests who didn't matter. And I waved and I sat back down, and I let them have it. I let the whole room believe him, because in the leather folder on my lap, the one I'd carried in past security like it was nothing, like it was just a woman's planner, there was a document with a date on it, a government timestamp, and that date was 18 months before the one printed in the program under my brother's name, beside the word "filed." I didn't say that yet. I just rested my hand flat on the folder and let it warm under my palm, and I watched my brother accept a crystal trophy for a thing he did not invent, and I thought, not yet. Let him finish. Let him have all of it, every minute, so there is nothing left to give back later. Come sit with me a minute. Let me pour the coffee, because this is one of those stories that has to be told slowly, in the right order, the way it actually happened. Not the smooth version a family agrees on afterward, where everyone decides together which daughter was the smart one. And before we go a single step further, I have to be honest with you about something. The way I had to be honest with myself in the back of that ballroom. Or you'll walk away thinking this is a simple story about a thief and the sister he robbed. It isn't simple, because I could have stopped it quietly. I had 10 minutes backstage before they called his name. I could have shown my brother that date in private, just the two of us, and let him step down with some dignity intact, claim a sudden illness, save the family the public ruin of it. I had that exact choice in my hand, with time to make it. And I want to ask you something, and I want you to really answer it before we reach the end, because I had to. If the people who'd spent 15 years telling the world you were the one without the gift handed you a microphone by accident, and you were holding the one piece of paper that proved every one of them wrong, would you take your brother aside and let him bow out softly? Or would you walk to that microphone and read the date out loud? Hold on to your answer. Now let me take you back and show you how a woman the family decided never had the talent ends up holding the only timestamp that matters. My name is Cora. I'm 38 years old, and for most of my life I was the cautionary tale my family told the younger cousins, the one who was always tinkering, always scribbling, and never made anything of it. I need you to understand the house before you can understand the stage. We were a family that worshipped one kind of mind, and only one. My father was an engineer, a real one, bridges and load tolerances, a man who believed the universe was a machine, and that the only people worth respecting were the ones who could read its blueprints. My mother taught high school physics for 30 years and married into that worship gladly. So in our house, intelligence wasn't just admired. It was the entire currency. You earned love the way you earned a grade. And from the time we were small, my parents had decided, the way some parents decide a child is musical or athletic, that the genius of the family was my younger brother, Theo. Theo was 3 years younger than me and quick in the way that photographs well. He could do mental arithmetic at parties. He could explain a concept back to an adult in the adult's own words and make them feel brilliant for having taught him. He had what I came to understand much later was a specific and shallow kind of gift. Not the gift of making things, but the gift of being seen to be the kind of person who makes things. There's a difference, and it took me 30 years and a stolen patent to learn it. Theo could stand in front of a whiteboard and perform understanding. He glowed under attention, the way a plant turns toward a window. And our parents, who measured a child's worth in exactly that light, looked at Theo glowing, and looked at me, quiet, stubborn, head down over a notebook, no performance in me at all. And they made their decision. Theo was the inventor. Cora was the one who tried. There was one person in that family who saw it differently, and I have to tell you about him now, because without ever meaning to, he handed me the habit that would one day decide everything. My grandfather. My mother's father. We called him Pop. Pop had been a machinist, not an engineer. He worked with his hands his whole life, in a shop that smelled of cutting oil and hot metal, and the engineers in our family treated him with a kind of gentle condescension, as if working a lathe were a quaint thing a man did before real intelligence was invented. But Pop knew something the rest of them didn't. He knew the difference between the person who explains the machine and the person who can actually build it. And he'd watched me from the time I was 7, sitting at his workbench taking apart a clock to see what made it keep time, and he'd seen the thing in me that nobody else in that house would name. He gave me a notebook when I was 9, a real one, black cover, graph paper, the kind he used in the shop, and he sat me down on the high stool by his vise, and he told me something I didn't understand the weight of for 30 years. He said, "Cora, when you make a thing, when you figure out a thing nobody figured out before, you write it down. The day you thought of it. You sign it, you date it, you don't tear the pages out, and you never let anybody hold the only copy." I asked him why, in the way a 9-year-old asks why, and he wiped his hands on his rag and looked at me for a long moment and said, "Because the ones who can talk about ideas will always try to take credit from the ones who can actually have them, and the only thing that beats a good talker is a date. Write down your dates, kiddo. They can argue with everything else. They can't argue with a date." I thought it was just a nice thing, an old man said. I kept the notebook because I loved him. I dated my pages because he'd told me to, and it became a habit, the way a habit becomes a thing your hand does without asking your mind. For 30 years I dated my pages. I have no idea even now whether Pop somehow saw exactly what was coming, or whether he'd simply lived long enough to know how families distribute credit. But he was the protector, my grandfather instinct in this story. And he was gone, dead of a heart attack in his own shop when I was 26, 8 years before any of this happened. And I think about him every single time I open a folder. Now let me tell you about the design, because the design is the whole heart of it. I want to be precise about what I made, because the precision is the thing they spent 15 years trying to blur. When I was 23, in my last year of a graduate program my parents grudgingly paid for. "We just don't want you to be disappointed, Cora," was the line they used about that program. Said with the sorrowful generosity of people funding a hopeless cause, I solved a problem. A real one. It was a problem in the field of medical device fluidics, a problem with how a certain kind of implantable drug pump regulated flow at very low volumes where the existing valves were prone to a failure that could be dangerous. I won't drown you in the engineering. What matters is this. The standard approaches all tried to make the valve more precise, and they all hit the same wall. And one night in a basement lab, alone, at the hour when the building empties out and the mind goes loose and strange, I stopped trying to make the valve more precise and asked a different question. What if the valve didn't need to be precise at all? If you changed the geometry so the imprecision canceled itself out? A passive correction, no moving parts to fail. It was, and I can say this now without shame because the record finally says it too, an elegant solution. It was the kind of idea that makes other engineers go quiet for a second when they finally understand it. And I did what Pop told me. I wrote it down. The date. I can still see it. A Tuesday in October. The sketches, the math, the geometry, page after page in a graph paper notebook with my name on the inside cover. I dated every page. I did not tear any out. And because by then I was an adult who'd read about how these things go wrong, I did one more thing Pop never lived to teach me but would have. I filed a provisional patent application with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. A provisional is a simple thing, a placeholder. You describe your invention, you pay a small fee, and the government stamps it with a date and holds your place in line for a year. It is not the full patent. It's the flag you plant to say I was here first, on this day. And attached to my provisional, as supporting material, I uploaded scans of those notebook pages. My handwriting, my dates, my geometry. Filed under my name, Cora, with a government timestamp on it that no human being can move. I want you to hold on to that, because everyone else in this story forgot it existed. I almost forgot it existed myself. Hold on to the provisional. It sits in the dark for a long time before we open it. Here is where I have to tell you how the theft actually worked, because it wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was slow and it was wrapped in love, and that's what made it nearly perfect. I never had the money to convert that provisional into a full patent. A provisional expires after 12 months if you don't follow it up with the real, expensive, attorney-driven full application. And the full application costs many thousands of dollars I did not have, working as I was as a junior engineer at a company that had nothing to do with my idea, paying off the graduate loans my parents had so generously reminded me they'd co-signed. So my provisional sat. And, exactly as the law allows, 12 months later it lapsed, unconverted. The flag I'd planted came down. But here is the thing the family never understood, and the thing this whole story turns on. A lapsed provisional does not disappear. It does not get erased. It remains, forever, in the records of the United States government. A permanent, time-stamped, dated proof that on a specific Tuesday in October, a person named Cora described this exact invention in detail. The flag came down. The hole where I'd planted it stayed in the ground with the date carved into the rim. I made one mistake, and I'll own it, because this story doesn't work if I pretend I was perfect. I trusted my brother. The summer my provisional was about to lapse, Theo, who was finishing his MBA, who'd never built anything but who could talk to investors the way I could talk to a valve, asked me to walk him through what I'd been working on. For a paper, he said. For a business school case study on innovation. And I was so starved, you have to understand. So starved for one member of my family to look at my work and take it seriously, that I sat with him for 3 nights, and I explained the whole thing. The problem, the failure mode, the geometry, the passive correction, why it was elegant, why the existing players had all missed it. I showed him the notebook. I let him photograph pages. He asked good questions. He nodded in the right places. And for 3 nights I felt, for the first time in my adult life, like the smart one in the room with my brother. And I mistook that feeling for love. Drop a single word in the comments if you've ever explained the best thing you ever made to someone who was smiling and nodding and quietly taking inventory. Because I think there are far more of us out here than that kind of person ever wants to count. If you've ever been the one who could make it, but never the one who got the credit, the reliable mind in a family that only applauded the loud one, stay with me. Because what my brother did with those 3 nights is the spine of everything that comes next. 18 months after my provisional lapsed, Theo filed a patent, his name on it. The same invention, not similar, not inspired by, the same passive correction geometry, described in language I recognized because some of it was my own, lifted from a notebook he'd photographed. And he didn't file it quietly. He filed it as the founding asset of a startup, a medical device company, and he went to our parents. And our parents, who had spent 23 years certain that Theo was the family genius, did not hesitate. They remortgaged the house. They cashed a retirement account. They put their faith and a frightening amount of their money into Theo's company, built on Theo's brilliant patent, the patent for the thing their son had invented. The thing their daughter had explained to him over 3 nights, 2.5 years earlier, the daughter who never quite had the talent. I didn't know. That's the part that still takes my breath. For the first long stretch of it, I genuinely did not know. I'd drifted away from my family in those years. When you grow up being the disappointment, you eventually stop showing up to be disappointed in. And I'd lost track of Theo's particular ventures. of which there had been several, all of them, until now, failed. I heard, secondhand, at a cousin's wedding, that Theo's company is doing really well. You should be so proud of him. And I was, in a distant, dutiful way. I didn't connect it to anything. Why would I? My idea had lapsed. It was a thing I'd done once, in a basement years ago, and given up on. I'd half buried it the way you bury a dream you can't afford. I had no idea my brother had dug it up. Let me take you through the years between, quickly, because they were lean and they were quiet, and they're the soil everything later grew in. I kept working. Not on my old idea, I'd let that go. But I never stopped being the person Pop saw at the workbench. I became, over those years, a genuinely good engineer at a genuinely unglamorous company that made flow control components for water treatment systems. Not sexy. Nobody ever crowns you Inventor of the Year for a better backflow preventer. But I was good, and I was respected by the people who actually understood the work, and slowly I built a life that did not require my family's approval to stand up. I want you to know that, because I don't want you to picture a broken woman waiting in the dark for revenge. I wasn't waiting for anything. I had a small apartment with a workbench in it, a few real friends, and a habit, still, of dating every page of every notebook, because Pop had told me to, and because by then it was just who I was. And I had Marisol. I have to tell you about Marisol, because she's the second protector in this story, the living one, and the parallel thread you'll need to understand how any of it came undone. Marisol was a patent attorney. Not mine, I couldn't have afforded her. She was a woman I'd met in a community college night class we both took for fun. A ceramics class of all things. Two tired professionals throwing lopsided bowls on a Tuesday. We became the kind of friends who can sit in silence. And Marisol, over a couple of years of those Tuesdays, got the whole story out of me in pieces. The basement, the provisional, the 3 nights with Theo. The company I'd heard was doing so well. She never said much when I told it. She just got a particular still expression that I'd later learn meant her professional mind had locked onto something. One night, washing clay off her hands at the sink, she said almost idly, "You said you filed a provisional." I said yes. Years ago, it lapsed. It's nothing. And she dried her hands and looked at me and said, "Cora, a lapsed provisional is not nothing. A lapsed provisional is a dated public record. Do you understand what that means in a priority dispute?" And I said no, because I genuinely didn't. And she said, "It means you have a flag in the ground with a date on it that came before his. Don't ever let anyone tell you that idea was his. The government has it in writing that it was yours, 18 months sooner." I told her it didn't matter. It was old. It was over. I'd moved on. And she let it go that night. But I saw her file it away somewhere behind her eyes, the way she did. Hold on to Marisol. She comes back at exactly the moment I think there's nothing to be done. Now here is where the story turns. And I want to slow down and take you into it the way it happened to me. Because it happened all at once, on an ordinary Wednesday, in my inbox. I got an email from my mother, of all people, who emailed me perhaps twice a year. The subject line said, "So proud," with 2 exclamation points, and that alone should have warned me. Inside was a forwarded press release and a note. "Cora, your brother's company is being recognized at the MedTech Innovators Gala next month, and Theo is being named Inventor of the Year for his pump valve. We're all going. He'd love for you to be there. We've reserved you a seat. Please come. It would mean so much to the family." All caps on family, the way she always did it, the way the word was a small fence she put up to keep me on the right side of. I almost deleted it. I want you to know how close I came. I had a policy by then of not attending events designed to celebrate the brother whose entire identity had been built on the rubble of being told I was the lesser mind. But something in the press release snagged. I opened it, the actual release, and I read the technical description of the award-winning invention. the pump valve, the passive correction, and the floor of my stomach simply dropped out because I was reading my own basement, my own Tuesday in October, my own geometry, in the careful corporate language of a press release, attributed entirely to Theodore, to my brother, as the sole inventor and visionary founder. I read it 11 times. I'm not exaggerating. I counted later, the way you count things when you're trying to keep your mind from flying apart. And the first thing I felt, before the anger, before anything, was a strange and terrible vindication, because some buried part of me sat up and said, I knew it was good, I knew it was real. They told me for 15 years that I never had the talent, and here was a 400-person gala about to give my brother a trophy for the single best thing I ever thought of in my life. The proof that I'd had the talent all along was the same fact that proved he'd stolen it. Those two truths came in the same package, and I sat at my kitchen table and held them both. And then I did what I do when I'm most afraid. I got very, very quiet. And I did the thing Pop taught me. I went looking for the date. Let me walk you through that night. The night I went looking. Because it's the hinge the whole story swings on. And I want you to feel it the way I did. I went to the USPTO's public database. It's open. Anyone can search it. The records of the United States Patent and Trademark Office are public the way the law intended them to be. And I searched. And there it was. My provisional application. Lapsed? Yes. Expired? Yes. But present. Permanent. A government file with a filing date stamped on it. A Tuesday in October. The exact one I remembered. With my name on it. Cora. And, attached as supporting documentation, the scans I'd uploaded all those years ago. My grandfather's graph paper. My handwriting. My dated pages. My geometry, sketched in my own hand. 8 years before a press release would call it my brother's vision. And then I searched Theo's patent, and I found his filing date. And I did the arithmetic that I would 3 weeks later do out loud into a microphone. His filing date came 18 months after mine. Not 18 days. Not a coincidence of parallel invention, the thing patent lawyers fight about, two honest people arriving at the same idea. 18 months, and a paper trail of photographs he'd taken of my notebook in between, and language in his application that matched mine because he'd copied it. The timeline was not a matter of opinion. It was not my word against his. It was 2 dates, stamped by the same government, and one of them was mine, and it came first. I sat with that until the sky went gray. And I want to tell you honestly what I felt, because it wasn't triumph. It was grief. Because the thing those 2 dates proved wasn't only that Theo was a thief. It was that my parents, who I had spent my whole life trying to make see me, had taken their own daughter's invention, watched their son claim it, and chosen, without a flicker of doubt, to believe the son. They'd remortgaged the house on it. They'd told the cousins to be proud. They had, in the most literal documentary sense, rewritten the history of which of their children had the gift, and they'd done it not because they had to, but because it was the story they'd always wanted to tell. The dates didn't just expose Theo, they exposed the whole machine of my childhood. And that is so much harder to hold than a simple theft. You can hate a thief cleanly. You cannot hate cleanly the discovery that your family preferred a lie about you to the truth of you. I called Marisol at 6 in the morning. She picked up on the second ring, which is its own kind of love. I told her. And there was a silence on the line. And then she said the sentence that changed the shape of everything. Cora, forward me both filing numbers. I'm going to pull the full file wrappers. A file wrapper, she explained, is the complete official record of a patent application. Every document, every date, every scan, certified by the government, the whole time-stamped history of a filing. If your provisional is in there with the date you say and the notebook scans you say, she told me, then you don't have an accusation. You have a record. There's a difference, and your brother is about to learn it. Stay with me, because the next 3 weeks were not empty waiting. They were the weeks I quietly built the thing. Marisol pulled both file wrappers. Anyone can request them. They're public. The system is designed so that exactly this kind of truth can't be buried by money or by a louder voice. And she sat with me at my own kitchen table, the clay still under her nails from that week's class, and she walked me through what I was holding. My provisional, certified, filing date stamped, notebook scans attached, time stamped on upload, my handwriting clear, and beside it, Theo's later application, his date 18 months downstream of mine. This, she said, tapping my page, is what lawyers call priority. The first to describe an invention in a dated public record has priority over everyone who comes after, no matter how much money they've raised, no matter how famous they've gotten, no matter what their press release says. You have priority, Cora, by a year and a half. It is, frankly, the cleanest priority case I have ever personally held in my hands. And do you know why it's so clean? I shook my head. And Marisol said, because you dated your pages. Most people don't. Most inventors get robbed and have nothing but their memory and their fury. You have a date. Somebody taught you to write down your dates. And I had to put my coffee down because I knew exactly who had taught me, and he'd been dead for 8 years, and he was sitting at that table with us all the same. Now I had a choice to make, and this is the choice I asked you to hold on to at the beginning. So let me lay it out plainly, the way it was laid out to me. Marisol gave me the lawyer's version of my options, in her calm, precise way, and I want you to weigh them as I did. Option 1. Do it through the courts. Quietly, properly, with motions and depositions. It would take years. It would cost a fortune I didn't have. And, this was the part that mattered, it would happen in the dark, in filings nobody reads, and even if I won, the 400 people in that ballroom, the cousins, the family, the whole world that had spent 15 years certain I never had the talent, would never know. The record would be corrected in a courthouse. The story would never be corrected in the only place it lived, which was in the minds of the people who'd believed it. Option 2. And Marisol was careful to say she was speaking now as my friend, not my attorney, was the gala itself. He's going to be on a stage, she said, in front of everyone whose opinion ever made you small, with a microphone, and you'll be holding the one document that makes it all unfalsifiable. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you that almost nobody who gets robbed ever gets the room. You're about to be handed the room. And there was a third option, the one I told you about at the start. The quiet mercy I could have chosen and didn't. I could go to the gala, find Theo backstage in the 10 minutes before they called his name, open the folder, and show him the date in private. Let him invent a sudden illness, decline the award, step down softly with the family none the wiser. Spare my parents the public ruin, spare myself the scene, take the moral high ground and let my brother keep his face. I thought about that third option for a long time. I want you to know, I really did, because I don't want you to think the woman in the back of that ballroom was cruel. I sat with it for 2 of those 3 weeks. And here is why I let it go, and I'll let you judge me, because the quiet mercy would have corrected the record for exactly one person. Theo, who already knew the truth, because you cannot accidentally steal an invention you spent 3 nights photographing. The only human being on earth who didn't need to learn the truth was the one the quiet option informed. Everyone who'd believed I never had the talent, my parents, the cousins, the 400 strangers, the whole architecture of a lie that had shaped my entire life, would walk out of that ballroom still believing it. A private mercy would have protected the lie. It would have let the family keep the story they preferred. And I decided, somewhere in the 3rd week, that I had spent 38 years protecting that family's idea of itself at the cost of the truth about me, and I was done. Not done in anger. Done the way you're done paying a bill you never owed. So I chose the room. But I chose it on one condition I set for myself, a condition I held to all the way through, and it's the thing I'm proudest of in this whole story. I would not raise my voice. I would not accuse. I would not make a single claim of my own. I would only read a date. I'd let the document do every bit of the work, because the document didn't need my fury to be true, and the moment I added fury, I'd be giving the family the breakdown they'd always expected of the unstable daughter, the one who never could handle it. No, I would be calm. I would be exact. I would be the engineer Pop saw at his workbench, and I would let two government dates say the thing I was never allowed to say myself. The night of the gala, I dressed plainly. I drove myself. And when I gave my name at the registration table, the young woman with the clipboard frowned, scanned her list, frowned again, and finally handed me a name tag she'd written by hand because I wasn't in the printed batch. And on it, in marker, she'd spelled my name wrong. Not Cora. Some other arrangement of letters, close but not mine, the way you misspell a name you've only ever heard mentioned and never thought mattered. I looked at it for a second. The misspelled name tag for the misremembered sister. And I'll be honest, that small wrong thing did something larger to me than the whole press release had. Because it was so exactly the size of how this family had always seen me, present enough to seat at the back, not important enough to spell right. I pinned it on anyway. I wore my own misspelled name into that room like it was the truest thing I had on. Because in about an hour, I was going to make them spell it correctly into the record of the United States government, and they were going to have to look at it forever. They'd seated me, as I told you, at a table near the kitchen doors. The family table. My parents, Theo's wife, a few cousins, was at the very front, beneath the stage, in the light. I could see the back of my mother's head. I watched her lean to a cousin and gesture proudly at the stage, the way you'd gesture at a sunrise you'd personally arranged. I sat with strangers, polite people from a vendor company who had no idea who I was, and I made small talk, and I kept the leather folder flat on my lap under the tablecloth, and I waited. If you've ever sat at the back of a room that was celebrating a lie about you, holding the truth in your lap, keeping your face perfectly pleasant while every cell in your body hummed, drop the word back in the comments, just that, so I know how many of us have been seated at the back of our own lives. And tell me, while you're there, what you'd have done with that folder. I want to know before I tell you what I did. Stay with me, because we're almost to the microphone. The dinner went the way those things go. There were speeches. There was a video about Theo's company, full of soaring music and shots of him looking thoughtfully out windows, narrated in the language of vision and disruption and changing patient lives. There was a moment in that video where they showed an animation of the valve, my valve, the passive correction, rotating slowly in clean white light while a voice called it a breakthrough born from one man's relentless curiosity. And I had to hold the edge of the table because there is a particular vertigo in watching the best thing you ever made, narrated as the property of someone else's curiosity, in a room that's applauding. I didn't make a sound. I'd promised myself I wouldn't. But I gripped that table edge until my fingers ached, and I let the wave pass, and I came out the other side of it colder and clearer than I'd gone in. And then they called his name. And my brother walked up onto that stage, into the light, and accepted the crystal trophy, and shook the hands, and stood at the microphone, with the easy glow of a man who has always been told he was the smartest one in the room, and has finally gotten the room to confirm it. And he gave his speech. And it was, I'll grant him, a good speech. Theo could always perform. Full of gratitude and humility, and a line about how innovation is really about seeing what others miss. And then, near the end, sweeping his hand toward the back, he found me, and he said it. The thing on the thumbnail of my whole life. My sister Cora's here somewhere. She always wanted to be the inventor in the family. Funny how it works out. She never quite had the talent for it, but she's got the biggest heart, and she's so proud of me. And the warm, sympathetic laugh moved through the room, and 400 heads turned to find the sister who tried, and I stood, and I waved, and I sat back down, and I felt the folder warm under my hand, and I thought, now, after this, let him finish first. Here is the thing he didn't know, the thing none of them knew, the small mechanical fact the whole night swung on. The MedTech Innovators Gala has a tradition. It was in the program, I'd read it days before, and it was the reason I'd come at all. After the Inventor of the Year accepts, they open the floor. A roving microphone, a few minutes for the community to share what this innovation means to them. It's meant for grateful colleagues and beaming mentors to stand up and say a few warm words. The organizers think of it as the heartwarming part of the evening. They had no idea they'd built a door, and that I was going to walk through it. So when the MC said, "And now we'd love to open the floor, does anyone in our community have a few words about tonight's honoree?" I raised my hand. And a young man in a headset, glad to have a taker, hurried over with the roving mic and held it out to me. And the room turned again, this time curious, because the woman at the back was standing up a second time. My brother, on stage, smiled down at me, indulgent, a little wary, the way you'd watch a relative you weren't sure would embarrass you. My mother turned in her seat at the front, and I took the microphone, and I felt it warm and live in my hand, and I did not raise my voice. I have never in my life spoken more quietly into a thing built to make a voice loud. "Thank you," I said. "I'm Cora. I'm Theo's sister, the one he mentioned. I'd like to say a few words about this invention. I've known it a long time." The room settled in, expecting something sweet. "It's an elegant design," I said, "a passive correction in the valve geometry, so the imprecision cancels itself out instead of being fought. No moving parts to fail. It really is a beautiful solution. I want to tell you exactly how beautiful, because I happen to know its whole history." I opened the leather folder. I did it slowly. "This is the public file from the United States Patent and Trademark Office for the invention you've honored tonight. It's a government record. Anyone in this room can pull it up on their phone right now. And I hope you do. There are two filings in the history of this design. The first," and I lifted the first page, and I held it so the front tables could see it, "is a provisional patent application. The government's timestamp on it reads October." And I read the date out loud, slow, every number of it, into the silence. That filing names a single inventor. Attached to it are 18 scanned pages of an engineering notebook, in handwriting, each page individually dated, describing this exact valve geometry. The name on that filing, and on every page of that notebook, is Cora. I paused. That's me. It's also, you'll notice, spelled correctly there, which is more than I can say for my name tag tonight. Nobody laughed. The room had gone the particular kind of quiet that has weight, the quiet of 400 people doing arithmetic at the same time. "The second filing," I said, and I lifted the second page, "is the patent my brother filed, and the one his company was built on, and the one you've given him a trophy for tonight. The government's timestamp on that one reads," and I read his date, "which, if you're following along, is 18 months later, a year and a half after the design was already on file, in detail, in another inventor's name, with dated drawings attached." I closed the folder. "I'm not here to make a claim. I haven't made one. I've read you two dates off two government documents, and you can verify both of them before I sit down. I'll just point out that priority, the legal right to an invention, belongs to whoever describes it first in a dated record, not whoever raises the most money, not whoever gives the best speech, whoever was first. And the record is unambiguous about who was first." I looked up at my brother, who had gone the color of the tablecloth. "Theo, I never wanted the company. I never wanted the money. You can keep talking about vision. I only ever wanted my name on the thing I made, and it turns out it's been there the whole time. You just had to be holding a trophy in front of 400 people for anyone to finally go and look." That is the date I read out loud. That is the moment the thumbnail promised you, and I told it to you exactly as it happened, because I made a promise of my own when I picked up that folder, that I would never blur a single fact, since blurring facts was the one thing my whole family had ever been good at. And then I handed the microphone back to the young man in the headset, and I sat down, and I folded my hands on the table, and I waited. The way the document waited, for the truth to do its work without any help from my volume. What happened next happened fast, and it happened the way these things always do. The loud people supplied all the noise, and I didn't have to supply any. My brother, at the microphone, made the mistake the guilty always make. He kept talking. If he'd said nothing, if he'd let it sit, he might have salvaged something with grace. Instead, he laughed, too loud, and said, "Cora, this is not the time you've always been." And he stopped, because there was no end to that sentence that helped him, and 400 people watched him fail to find one. Then he said the unforgivable thing, the thing that finished him, because panic always reaches for the oldest weapon. She's confused. She's always been a little. She was never the technical one. And from a table near the front, an actual voice, a man, an engineer, someone from the technical community who'd already pulled up the file on his phone, because of course he had, said, not unkindly, into the silence, "The dates are real. I'm looking at them. 18 months. It's right here." And that single sentence from a stranger with a phone, was the sound of the room changing sides. I watched it move across the tables like weather. My mother, at the front, turned all the way around in her seat to find me, and her face. I'd waited my whole life to read something true on that face. Her face was doing something I'd never once seen it do, which was reorganize itself in real time around a fact it could not refuse. She wasn't looking at her disappointing daughter anymore. She was looking at the inventor, and at the 18 months, and at the 30 years all at once, and I watched the cost of it land on her, and I felt no triumph, only a tired, ancient ache. The ache of a door closing on a room you'd been knocking at since you were 9 years old. The MC, to her credit, did the only thing she could. She came to the microphone and said the gala took matters of attribution extremely seriously, and that the award committee would be reviewing the evening's recognition, and she moved the program along. But everyone knew. You can't unring a date. The crystal trophy sat on the podium like a thing nobody wanted to touch. Let me tell you the cascade, because the consequences were real and they were not my doing. I want to be clear about that. I read 2 dates and sat down. Everything after was the structure collapsing under its own true weight. The award was rescinded within the week. The committee issued a quiet statement about a priority discrepancy and removed Theo's name from the honor roll. In the careful language of these things, they did not accuse, they simply corrected, which is all I'd done too. The company was worse. A medical device startup's entire value rests on its patent, and a patent whose priority is shattered by an earlier public filing in someone else's name is a patent that may not survive a challenge. And every investor in Theo's company learned that in the same week from the same gala that was supposed to crown him. The valuation, built on his name and his vision and his trophy, came apart. Not because I sued anyone, I still hadn't, by then, but because money is faster than fury, and money had done the same arithmetic the engineer with the phone had done, and money left. The company that my parents had remortgaged their house to fund, on the strength of their son's genius, did not make it through the year. And here I have to be honest with you about the part that isn't clean, because I promised you it wouldn't be. My parents lost a great deal. They had bet their security on the lie, and when the lie failed, they failed with it, and they were not young, and there was no good way to feel about that. I did not do it to them. They did it to themselves the day they chose to believe the son over the daughter, without ever once going to look at the public record that was sitting there the whole time, free for anyone who wanted the truth more than they wanted the story. But I'd be lying if I told you their ruin felt like victory. It felt like the bill for a thing they'd bought 30 years ago finally coming due, with all of us standing in the room when it did. If you've ever been right in a way that cost the people who wronged you everything, and found that being right that completely doesn't warm you the way you thought it would, you know the strange grief I'm talking about. It's the loneliest correct a person can be. Now let me tell you the quiet part. The part the thumbnail couldn't fit, because this is the part I actually carry. A week after the gala, I got the only contact from Theo I would ever get about any of it. Not an apology, He wasn't built for one. A text. It said, "You could have told me backstage. You ruined me on purpose." And I looked at that for a long time, because it was true, the first half, and I'd told you so at the very beginning. I could have told him backstage, and I sat with my phone and I typed back the truest thing I know, and it's the truest thing I can leave you with, too. I wrote, "I didn't ruin you, Theo. A date ruined you. I just read it where the right people could hear. You had 18 months to be a man who built his own thing. You spent them being a man who took mine. The backstage version would have let you keep being that man in private. I didn't owe you privacy for a theft. I owed myself the room." And then I put the phone down, and I did not wait for an answer, because I'd already gotten the only thing I ever wanted. And it wasn't from him. I want to take you to the very last image, because Pop belongs at the end of this. The week after the award was rescinded, the USPTO record was formally corrected, the priority restored on paper, in the permanent record of the United States government, to the name that had been there first. Cora. Spelled right. And I did one thing with that, just one, and then I let the whole matter rest. I had a single page of that corrected record printed and framed. Not the trophy. I never wanted the trophy. They could melt the crystal down for all I cared. Just the one page with the date on it and my name spelled correctly and the word priority in the government's flat, eternal language. And I hung it not in my home but in a place I'd started. A small fund I set up that year, quietly, with the modest settlement that eventually came, to give graph paper notebooks and a little filing money to young engineers from families that had decided, early and wrongly, which of their children had the gift. I named the fund after my grandfather. The Pop Fund, the kids call it, though his real name is on the wall too, spelled right. And on the day I hung that framed page, I stood in front of it alone after everyone had gone, and I put my thumb on the date, the Tuesday in October, the one I'd carried for 15 years. And I felt the old graph paper of my grandfather's notebook under everything, the way you feel a hand on your shoulder that isn't there. I don't talk to my parents much now. There's a door there, not a wall. I want to be precise because precision is the only inheritance I trust. The door is open. It's just open on my side, where I can see it, and they have to be the ones to walk through it, and they have to come to the inventor, not the daughter who tried. That offer stands. I'm not holding my breath. People who spent 30 years preferring a lie about you don't usually arrive, late, hungry for the truth. But the door's there. I keep it where I can see it. Here's the thing I finally understand. The thing Pop knew at his vice when I was 9, and couldn't have told me in words I'd have heard. Blood will tell you who you are, loudly, with total confidence for your entire life. And blood is very often wrong, and it will never, ever go in check. A date will not tell you who you are. A date will only sit there, patient, in the dark, in a public record nobody bothers to open, being true whether or not a single person believes it. My family had all the confidence. I had the date. And it turns out that in the end, the date is the only thing in this whole story that never once lied to me. Write down your dates, kiddo. They can argue with everything else. They can't argue with a date. If this one reached you, if you've ever been the one who could actually make the thing, and watch the credit go to the one who could only talk about it, do me a small kindness and share it with the person in your life who'd understand. Because the reliable minds need to find each other out here, and the algorithm only carries us as far as you carry us. And stay close, because next time I'm going to tell you about the cousin who showed up at the Pop Fund's first ceremony with a folder of her own, and a story about a recipe, a will, and a signature that didn't match, and what she asked me to help her go look up. That one's still unspooling. I'll tell it when it's ready. Doors, not walls. I'll keep mine where I can see it. Same chair next time.